It's my first time printing and painting a Hero Forge Mini. A hero is born this week on Short Rest Studios. So a new member joined our D&D party recently, and I said to him, hey, if you'll go on Hero Forge and design yourself a miniature, I'll print it and paint it for you. And he was like, cool. So he bought this STL that he designed himself, and I printed and painted it for him, and you get to see the journey on Short Rest Studios this week. From simple basing to simple painting techniques to my first time really trying to get in there and do the eyes because I was always too nervous and I always wound up giving them crazy eyes before. But I think this time it turned out really well. So let's check it out. I'm going to start by mixing some basic black and white to make a gray. I'm going to mix that together really well, and then I'm just going to apply it to all of his armor and weapons just to give a good base color for those metallic pieces before I get into the metallic paints later on. And now I'm going to switch to some Vallejo Game Color Earth, and that's what I'm going to use for the base coat for all of his skin. And so I'm layering on different colors here. I'm going to start with this brown, and I'm going to layer some other lighter flesh tones on top to create the depth of color and some highlights. Layering is something that I really am still learning. I've been doing it a little while, but I'm still kind of getting the hang of it. But I really enjoy the results, and I think if you haven't really tried to layer colors on, if you're a novice and a noob painter, you should really give it a shot. It adds a little extra time to your projects, but the outcomes are definitely worth it. And now I'm going to use some Vallejo Model Color Flat Brown as the base coat for his hair. And you can see here I'm putting a little water to it, I'm thinning it out. Vallejo paints, which I pretty much use exclusively, are pretty thick, and so they definitely need to be thinned down. I know different paints have different thicknesses, and you want to be aware of how thick your paint is. If it's too thick, then you're going to lose detail. It's going to fill in some of those little tiny details on that model. Multiple thin coats is definitely better than one really thick coat. It'll take you longer, but your model's going to look so much better, man. I mean, and trust me, I've learned this the hard way. You should see some of my early stuff. And now we're going to switch to some Vallejo Game Color Gunmetal to paint that armor. And I know there are different techniques for painting metallic surfaces that don't require metallic paints, but I gotta be honest, I like the metallic paints. I think they're fun. They're so shiny. And I'm hitting all these metallic surfaces, and this dude has a lot of metal on him. He's got the shield, he's got the sword, he's got the breastplate and the boots, and I'm hitting it all with that gunmetal. Now we'll come back later and add some other colors for trim and highlights. And now we got some glorious gold. Shake it up, baby. Thin it down. And then I'm going to use it to put in some of that trim color. There's going to be a gold hilt on his sword. There's a gold frame around his shield. And for some reason I decided to paint his cape now instead of finishing all the gold, but I'm mixing it together, some blue and black, and then a tiny bit of white and red, because my wife tells me that the secret to mixing navy blue is adding pink, and I don't have any pink, so I just mixed together some white and red there. So I'm making sort of a navy blue. It's a little bit lighter than I originally intended, but I actually kind of like the color. It's a bit of a blue-gray, and so I'm base coating now his cape. So here's the reason actually that I went and did this instead of finishing the gold, is because this is one of the base colors, and I should have finished my base colors before I went in and started doing the gold and the gunmetal. But I got excited about the metallic paints. And you can see here I'm also applying that blue color to his pants, his little leggings, because I thought he should not have bare legs as well as bare arms, because that would be weird. And now we're switching to leather brown for some of those leather pieces, like his gloves on his hands. He's got a belt. He's got some hoops that his axes fit through on his belt. And all of those are going to get a hit of this leather brown before we move on to highlighting. And now after cleaning out that brush, I'm going back to my gold. And then apparently I'm just all over the place, so I went back and started doing some other things with gunmetal, because I realized that some parts of him were supposed to be metal, like the sleeves, which are actually part of his armor and not part of his clothing, as I initially thought. So I'm just going back and hitting the rest of those spots, and I'm gonna finish up his boots, which apparently I did not do earlier. I just neglected to paint his footwear. Looking sexy so far. Now I get out the Parasite Brown, which is kind of a reddish brown, a little bit brighter color than some of the other browns I've used, and I'm just using it to hit a couple of things, give some highlights, give some different color to some of those brown things on his body. And now we're gonna get the flat brown out again and the number 0 round brush, and I am painting the handle of his axe. And of course he's got 2 of them. Well, now that I've actually finished all the base colors, I'm going to get out that glorious gold and paint the trim on his shield first. But I'm going to go ahead and hit some details that I think will really pop once I apply that gold to them. So I'm painting not just the front edge of the shield, but the actual edges and the back of that edge, because it's basically a trim piece that goes all the way around, or it's designed to look like a trim piece that goes all the way around the shield. It looks pretty good. This is where things start to get a little bit tricky. He's got some really nice detailing on his armor, and I'm hitting some of that with the gold just to create some visual interest with the variation in color. And since I can't get my camera angles quite right, you're gonna have to believe me when I say this detailing right now just looks phenomenal. Gold knee pads, baby. Everybody needs some gold knee pads. And now we move on to silver, which I'm going to use to highlight on the gunmetal parts of his armor. I'm just finding those raised places, usually the tops of those raised places. For example, that top edge of his sword should look like it's reflecting more light. And now I'm attempting to make some of the support scars on the shield, which are minimal, look like battle damage. And then I move on to some other highlights with the silver, just hitting everything: boots, breastplate, shoulders. And now we're going to move on to regular old gold, which is a bit brighter than glorious gold, and we're going to use it for some highlights on the gold parts. Pretty straightforward, makes perfect sense, same idea. Highlight those edges that would be most reflective in a real life situation, just to give it a little variation and make it look a little bit more realistic. And now once again, because I'm easily distracted, I realize I didn't highlight the metal parts of his weapons, and so I'm going to go back and do that now. Squirrel! And then I'm going to finish up highlighting the gold. And now back to our old friend Parasite Brown, and we're going to use that to put some highlights on his head, because his hair has some nice texture in it. It's one of the nice parts of this design, and so to bring that out a little bit more, add some variation and some warmth, we're going to use that brighter, warmer shade of brown to put highlights in it. And not just the hair on top of his head, but his facial hair, because that man has a manly crumb catcher. And now we're going to start with bronze flesh and flat flesh in painting his skin. We're going to start with bronze flesh on his face, including that little ear right there. We got to make sure we get all those little details just to bring it out. Make sure that the tip of your brush is in good shape, and you're trying to hit broad highlights. They are highlights, but they're going to be bigger than the brighter colors that we use later on. We're going to cover most of his skin with the bronze flesh tone, but we want to leave a few valleys of the brown so that the details come out. And now we're moving on to the flat flesh, and we're hitting the same spots. We're just doing smaller areas, and that makes the flesh tone look a little more natural for someone with lighter skin. And we're still leaving some of that bronze flesh tone exposed. And what that does is just creates the illusion of variations in skin tone, which then bring out the details in the design of this mini. And now we pull out the Elfic flesh, and we're going to mix that in with some of the flat flesh. And this is something we want to be really sparing with, right? This is really just for highlights. So I'm just hitting things like the top of his bicep, just to add a little bit of that illusion of reflected light. And I'm also going to put that on his nose and on his cheekbone and on his brow, but really sparingly, just small areas. What a man! Ain't gonna lie, Ultramarine is one of my favorite paint colors from Vallejo. And what I'm using that for is to create some of those broad highlights on the folds of his cape. I'm only doing this on the top of his cape. Since the bottom is in shadow, I don't mess with the highlights at all, but I'm taking the folds of that cape and the parts that are raised, I'm adding that ultramarine to it just to bring them out more. Again, create variation, so it makes it easier to see the detail, gives the illusion of shadow down in the deep folds. And now I'm pulling out some azure model color, and I'm adding a thinner highlight, just a line that moves along the top of the folds of that cape, just to really make them pop. And this for me is when the piece really starts to come alive, when you can really start to see those colors pop and it becomes vibrant. You might think there's too much variation in these colors, but we're going to do something later that's going to bring them all into cohesion with each other. Now I'm taking some of that ultramarine and dry brushing out on his pants, because there are no details on his pants really for me to highlight the way I did his cape. So we're just giving it a quick, soft dry brush just to add a little reflection. And now I'd like to introduce you to Tinny Tin. For character reasons, I wanted this mini to look like it was standing on a metal floor, and so I just painted the base with Tinny Tin. You can see I tried something else earlier, but it just didn't really work for me, so I decided just to make it a straight metal floor. I should have done this at the beginning, but I decided at the last minute to try to paint the eyes in a way that I haven't done before. So I got out the Elfic flesh and I made some practice passes on my thumb just to make sure I could get a really fine line, because I need to very carefully color in the recesses of his eyes with that white. And now I'm getting some black, and this is the hardest part, guys. I hate this. But I'm taking those practice strokes, getting a nice fine point on my brush, and I'm just putting a little black dot right in the middle of each of those white areas for each of his eyes. That's going to represent the pupil. And now we're going to take some dark flesh tone, which is a warm brown. I'm making some practice strokes again on my thumb just to make sure I can get that fine point, and I'm going to draw outlines in the shape of an eye, as close as I can get, around that white area to now create some definition and make those eyes really stand out and pop and look like something instead of just white blobs with a black dot in the middle. And once I finished that, I messed up some of the white, so I'm just getting a little more of that Elfic flesh and fixing what I messed up. Incidentally, it took me a really long time to do this. I've never done it before, but Lila Meb has a great video on her channel that shows you exactly how to do that. I'm going to link it. And now I'm going to move on to some brown wash, which I made myself in the style of Black Magic Crafts black wash, and I'm just painting that all over his hair, just making sure to get it everywhere, especially in the recesses, but it's really going to unify the whole look of those highlights. And now we've got some blue ink, which I'm going to use like a wash or a glaze and put it over his cape. This is the step I mentioned earlier, which is really going to unify the varying colors on his cape and pants while still maintaining the look of shadows and highlights. And then I take some brown wash again and I put it on his gloves, his belt, the wooden handles of his weapons, things like that. And now I'm going to take my homemade black wash and I'm going to apply that liberally to all the metal surfaces, his armor, the base, everything, just to give it a little bit of grime, to make it look used, to give it some shadow and variation, to bring out the details, and it is going to look sweet. I never put black wash all over a mini unless it's like a goblin or an orc or something I really want to look grimy, but with the metal pieces it really helps to create shadow and variation.
Well, there it was.
my first time working with a Hero Forge Mini, and I actually really enjoyed it. The details are nice. They're not so crazy that you can't get in there and paint them up really nice. I think it came out really good. It's definitely great for the tabletop, and my player was really, really happy with the outcome. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something, if you just got any kind of use out of this at all, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button down below and help me get this video out to more people. If you want to keep up with what we're doing here, if you want more of this kind of content, hit the battle axe down below to subscribe to this channel. Leave me some comments. Let me know what kind of content you want to see on this channel, what kind of miniatures you want to paint, what kind of printing you want to happen. Just put that in the comments. And I will see you for another adventure next week on Short Rest Studios.